But Aristotle says the reason we need rhetoric is we have to be able to use it. To use rhetoric influence the ramble. We try to get them to understand truth. Truth is suggest, is different than rhetoric. Rhetoric is the dressing, is the body, right? Truth is the spirit, is the soul, is abstract. It doesn't have a body. It's not particular. If you want to get somebody to the truth, you might have to use some kind of tricks, right? Because most of people are not sound and can see the truth. That's what we think. Most people are rambles, really. Only the educated, be erudite, are actually capable of seeing the truth. If you want to get the general mass there, you may have to do a little bit. So Aristotle, that is rhetoric. Rhetoric is something that is used to influence people, right? And it's kind of mentally promised a logic.
Wilson came then from a different world, and he became the focal point of a broad mainstream American culture that thought that modern literature and wanted modern literature to be able to be read and appreciated by ordinary people. They were not modernists in an abstract sense, and certainly some of them, like T.S. Eliot and Faulkner, were too difficult for some of their writings to be read by ordinary people. But this was a world before the division between the brows or between elite or whatever had established itself as part of our consciousness. Wilson was a major player in the successful effort of his generation to establish at the heart of American life an innovative literature that would equal the great cultures of Europe. And he knew that the great cultures of Europe were there. He was not a product of a narrow American studies kind of training at all. He joined a high artistic standard with an openness to all experience and a belief that literature was as much a part of life for everyone as conversation. He thought that Proust and Joyce and Yeats and Eliot could and should be read by ordinary Americans and helped that to happen. Wilson was a very various man. Over a period of almost 50 years, he was a literary journalist, an investigative reporter, a brilliant memoirist, and dedicated journal keeper.
The earliest writers on politics, and I'm thinking of Plato and Aristotle here, felt free to draw insights from all areas of human knowledge, unlike modern academic writers who tend to put things into smaller and smaller compartments or focus more closely on one area of inquiry. For example, Plato would examine a whole political system and the philosophy that underlies it, whereas modern writers on politics might concentrate on one particular institution in that system, the House of Lords in England, or on voting patterns within a country. With this focus, the bigger questions that the ancients dealt with, what is the best form of government, or what is justice, tend to get left behind. Many writers on politics these days are university-based, and so have to have specialised interests. And while they may make new and interesting discoveries in their special field, it is at the loss of a broader perspective, not to mention the loss of a general audience or readership. In the 19th century, there were still writers who used the same freedom of inquiry as the ancients, and are all the more readable and relevant because of it.
5. Listen to a discussion in a music history class. The class is studying improvisation.
Every jazz player knows what he or she means by improvisation, and all writers know what they mean by improvisation. The result, of course, is a lot of confusion and disagreement about what improvisation really is. We hear about the different types of improvisation: free improvisation, and controlled improvisation, and collective improvisation. What does it all mean? Yes, Mary?
My dictionary says improvise means to compose or recite without preparation.
That's true, but it tells us only part of the story. As we know, musicians learn how to play their instruments before they can improvise, so they do have some preparation. Yes, Arthur?
Maybe a better definition is composing and performing at the same time.
That tells us another part of the story. Let's try to understand it more by looking at history.
Signs advertising business premises have been around for thousands of years and were used in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome to attract customers. And they often used symbols to illustrate what kind of business it was. For example, bushes or branches of ivy meant the place was a tavern. Both of these, the tavern and its sign, were introduced into Britain by the Romans in the first half of the 1st century AD. In Europe in the Middle Ages, signs became more common. Then, in the 14th century, English merchants were obliged to have them outside their shops. However, the fashion was to have large swinging signs hung from a strut sticking out of the wall, and many public houses still have such signs. But so many accidents occurred, mostly involving people on horseback, that in the 17th century a law was brought in, requiring shopkeepers to mount their signs flat against the wall of the premises, where they could do no harm.
Now, one of the workplace models I want to look at today is telecommuting. Done properly, telecommuting makes good business sense and companies can make huge savings on their overheads. It can also be a very effective lure to recruit quality employees, but companies need to plan ahead and create the right culture for it to work. It's not as simple as just giving everybody a laptop and sending them off to work from home. Management needs to look at training, security and communication issues before any kind of telecommuting agreement is entered into. Now, a key part of making it work is ensuring that every employee, and that's whether they're at home or in the office, has equal access to resources and, of course, promotions. The last thing you want is to create a kind of us versus them scenario. The arrangement breaks down quickly if people start feeling isolated or limited in their chances of moving up the ladder if they aren't physically in the office. There has to be foresight right from the start in the hiring process. It's vital to screen employees carefully to determine who will be able to prosper working away from the office. Some companies give personality tests to prospective workers, and they do them online or over the phone to see if they're comfortable with that type of setup.
A hurricane is a massive storm system. In fact, it's the most powerful type of storm on Earth. Hurricanes form over warm tropical waters and frequently move toward land. Before I forget to mention this, hurricanes are also called typhoons or cyclones. It depends on where exactly they form. Not all hurricanes are alike. Some are more powerful than others. Meteorologists have a rating system for them. They used the term category to rank. Every hurricane that forms the scale ranks hurricanes according to their wind speed and ability to cause damage. A Category 1 hurricane is the weakest. A Category 5 hurricane is the most powerful. A hurricane typically begins as a tropical storm. It has wind speeds between 50 to 100 km per hour. When the wind blows faster than 100 km per hour, the tropical storm has become a hurricane. A Category 1 hurricane's winds are between 100 to 130 km per hour. A Category 2 hurricane has winds up to 160 km per hour. Winds between 160 and 185 km per hour indicate a Category 3 hurricane. A Category 4 hurricane has wind speeds up to 220 km per hour. Anything above that is a Class 5 hur. Again, thankfully, those are quite rare. They are simply devastating when they form and make landfall. Oh, by the way, before you ask, typhoons and cyclones use different measuring systems. So what I just described only applies to hurricanes.
Avalanches are a constant threat on mountain highways. The Rogers Pass stretch of the Trans-Canada is at risk of being buried in snow from November to April every year. This is why the highway now has a sophisticated defense system. The best way, it's important to control an avalanche when it's small, so a slide is set off while it's still small before it builds up into a serious danger. A team of snow technicians monitors the snowpack. They sort of read the snow and try to predict when it's likely to slide. They study data from the weather stations in the mountains. As the danger increases, they drop explosives onto test slopes to see if the snow can be made.
In the 19th century, there were several periods when large numbers of people moved from one place to another around the world. In many cases, people moved to another continent. These mass migrations were on a much larger scale than any previous migrations in history. One major movement was from Europe to the Americas, Australia, and Africa. This migration of Europeans involved around 60 million people over 100 years. Another mass migration was from Russia to Siberia and Central Asia. Another was from China, India, and Japan to Southeast Asia. These large movements of people were made possible by the new, cheap, and fast means of The complex process inside a leaf takes energy from the sun and uses it to convert water and carbon dioxide into sugars. During this process, photosynthesis, plants convert light energy into chemical energy. All leaves carry out photosynthesis in basically the same way. First, the pores on the leaf's outer skin open up and take in molecules of carbon dioxide. Water absorbed by the roots is transported upward through the plant, and it enters the leaf through its stem. Carbon dioxide and water, these are the raw materials for photosynthesis. Once carbon dioxide and water are present, photosynthesis can
We'll look now at a very interesting study. It was carried out by a researcher who works in 2 countries, Scotland and Italy, and it involved children from both of these countries aged around 9 or so. Half of the children from each country spoke only their national language. However, the other half spoke their national language plus another language. During the study, all the participants were given tests and quizzes which looked at a range of skills, including vocabulary understanding, problem solving, creative thinking and arithmetic. The children used their national language to complete the tasks, which involved things like copying patterns of colored blocks, orally repeating a series of numbers and giving clear definitions of words. The results were quite clear. The bilingual children were significantly more successful in the tasks. We'll look now at a very interesting study. It was carried out by a researcher who works in 2 countries, Scotland and Italy, and it involved children from both of these countries aged around 9 or so. Half of the children from each country spoke only their national language. However, the other half spoke their national language plus another language. During the study, all the participants were given tests and quizzes which looked at a range of skills, including vocabulary understanding, problem solving, creative thinking and arithmetic. The children used their national language to complete the tasks, which involved things like copying patterns of colored blocks, orally repeating a series of numbers and giving clear definitions of words. The results were quite clear. The bilingual children were significantly more successful in the tasks.
Now, as you know already, there will be a midterm exam next week. The exam will be an open book, open note, and open internet resource exam. But you can't use a classmate or me during the exam. Many of the questions on this exam don't have definitive answers. I wish to assess your critical thinking ability and your ability to combine ideas. A poorly organized answer will not get the same grades as a well-organized answer. Here are some good ways to study for the exam. First of all, it would be better for you to organize and review your lecture notes. That means you may need to compile notes and lab test results if you have not done that already. I strongly suggest that you write trial outlines before the exam. I think it will make you feel more comfortable. Just stop by my office.
Privacy and the right to privacy are increasingly becoming hot topics in the media, which is a touch ironic given that it is often the media that is responsible for invasion of privacy. This is not just about those whose careers put them in the public eye, but ordinary people who, through no fault of their own, have come to public notice because of some event that has attracted the attention of the media. It might be that a member of their family has been imprisoned for some crime, rightfully or wrongfully, or perhaps they're the victims of some natural disaster. Some people argue that those who have chosen to be in the public sphere and have teams of public relations people to make sure they get as much public attention as possible, actors, rock stars, politicians and the like, have given up their right to privacy and get everything they deserve.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Cynthia Graber. This will just take a minute. Some people like to think there's something fated about who we fall in love with. It's that perfect mix of attraction, compatibility, and of course timing. But in some cases, fate may be taking its cues from birth control pills. First, let's go over a woman's cycle and how that affects attraction. When women are ovulating, their features change in ways that men unconsciously pick up. So men are particularly attracted to women when they're fertile. And it works the other way too. When a woman is fertile, she's more attracted to men with more traditionally masculine features and who are genetically dissimilar to her, or more compatible in terms of procreating. Of course, oral contraception changes a woman's hormonal cycles. Her body thinks it's pregnant and doesn't go through ovulation-induced changes. And in a study published this month in the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution, researchers say that women on the pill do not show the ovulation-induced attraction to genetically dissimilar partners. So they might be choosing men who are more genetically similar, which could lead to some of the problems with conception that have become increasingly common, because attraction isn't fate, it's chemistry.
Strangers in the night.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American 60-Second Science, I'm Cynthia Graber.
Strangers in the night.
Although the original American Indian cultures were highly diverse, they were similar in many of their traditions. Religious beliefs and rituals permeated every aspect of Indian life. Southwest tribes such as the Hopi and the Apaches had a rich and elaborate year-round sequence of ceremonies including songs, dances, and poetry. The Hopi performed dances to bring rain. The Apaches engaged in special dances and ceremonies to gain support of the spirits before undertaking raids or going into war. The Plains tribes often sought contact with the spirits by going on a vision quest.
All of the assignments must be submitted in person to the faculty office.
I don't think it's possible to solve the problem easily.
Observers waited nervously and bated their breath for the concert.
Remember to sign the attendance register before leaving the lecture hall.